This is House Planning Help, episode 168. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is Allan Corfield from Allan Corfield Architects, and we're going to be looking at the costs associated with hiring an architect. Getting quite specific, because we're going to be looking at Allan's costs. I have a quick thank you to do, though, for this episode, because Chris Marr, the founder of the Content Marketing Academy, connected us. He realised there was an overlap in what we do, and I've known that Allan is involved with home building and renovating as well as one of their experts. But it's nice to have a formal introduction, and we got chatting. We realised we had a lot in common, particularly because here on the podcast, I do a lot of content marketing myself. I've known Chris for a while. And actually, this is a good point that if you're someone who runs a business and you know that your marketing's not up to scratch, then I would pay attention to what Chris is doing, because he's right at the heart of this. And content marketing is really, it's just serving your customers better, giving them the information that they need, but upfront, and having it on your website so that they can just go straight to that and find out all the information that they need before they even contact you. And that's quite a good lead into today's topic of how much does it cost to hire an architect, because Allan on his website declares his costs up front. It's obviously not going to be exact because it depends on how big your house is and so forth. But for today's episode, we focus on an example of 4-bedroom house, 2-storey, 200 square metres, budget approximately £250,000. And so we're now able to examine some costs. And Allan's costs, of course, they might go up, they might go down, who knows? But it's great to be able to talk about some costs. And I actually feel that that's something that the magazines are good at, home building and renovating. They often in their articles have the costs. And I'd love to do more about talking about specific costs, which is why we're doing today's episode. So I started by asking Allan to explain what drives him to do what he does.
Our whole principle and the whole reason for AC Architects is to try and help self-builders. We don't usually refer to ourselves as an architecture practice. We're here to help educate and help homeowners deliver their one-off dream home. That's really where the passion is, and we've grown and changed and evolved our service to suit that. And it's been over sort of 5 years to get to that point where we know how we can help a certain type of client to get to their end result, which is their dream home.
It's really interesting that you're focusing on self-builders. So this might already be going off track, but I want to know why. Why are you interested just in houses and self-builders?
So my background before being made redundant was commercial, actually in the defence sector, and I really didn't enjoy it. And I got a chance to do a couple of different one-off houses and extensions, and working with the private individual specifically on houses is a much more enjoyable process. So selfishly, that's what I want to be doing. And it's a business, I enjoy it, but it's a big part of my life, so I have to enjoy it. So that was part of the reason when I was made redundant to set up a business to do one-off houses. And 2 or 3 years into having the business, the self-build was becoming a bigger thing. It was becoming more accessible for everybody. Programs like Grand Designs, Building the Dream, and magazines like Home Building and Renovating were paving the way and making it more accessible for people to build their own home. And I saw a sort of opportunity. There's not many architecture practices focus on certain areas and trying to focus on a niche. And I saw that it was going to be becoming a bigger part of housing in the UK, and set things up around that. So,
when did you get going, and how have you grown?
So 2009 was made redundant. Thought, as many architects did, was above recessions and was living the dream, and 20 of us were made redundant at the same time, and there wasn't a job for an architect in Europe for 2 years. So I swallowed my pride and took a part-time job at night working in a call centre and set the business up during the day. It took a couple of years to get going. We got a couple of good opportunities for one-off houses, and from that point on seized on an opportunity to work with a company called Sips Industries, building structurally insulated panel houses. Got a partnership working with them, and grew. In 2012, I think, took on our first couple of staff members, That was a big realisation that it could actually be a business. And from that point grew, did a couple of really nice houses and grew to, we are now at 12. So last week we appointed a new chartered architect and a new passive house designer. So, which is another area that we want to get into. So I've seeked out a really good candidate and got him to come and join us. So that's where the practice has grown to. We're on project 250.
Wow.
And we've over the last 2 years, we started getting a lot of work down south, which is good, which is interesting, and it's grown from strength to strength.
From one business owner to another, well done. I know these challenges, it might sound simple to someone who doesn't run a business. You take on a few staff, it's all right. I know what that must mean, and a lot of respect for you to keep everything pedaling, keep it moving forwards.
It's tough. People don't see that, the 15-hour days, and not seeing your wife and your friends. They just see the nice lifestyle and the occasional social media posts on holiday, but they don't really see the overdraft and the borrowings and I need to make X amount to pay the bills at the end of the month, let alone pay myself. So it's been a struggle, but I've had some good people supporting me and helping me and guiding me. Touch wood, it's all going in the right direction, and it's actually a functioning business, which architects are notoriously bad at. So.
Yes, yeah, that could be a whole other story. One thing that I'm quite interested about is that this geographic area, you're obviously not shy to saying, no, I'm going to travel, I'm going to take business. Where do you draw that line, and why are you operating within that line?
I mean, there's not really anywhere in mainland UK. I'll qualify that. We've got our first couple of jobs in the Isles in Scotland. In the West Coast, so that's another challenge. But the way that we work in a 3D rendering package called ArchiCAD, so we can send out our drawing package to your iPad or to whatever it happens to be, and you can walk around your house. So you don't have to be there all the time. But with transport now, how easy and accessible it is, I can be in Penzance at 11 o'clock, have 2 or 3, 4 hours with a client, and then get a flight home. And all of our staff are used to that. We schedule our meetings, we're very well planned about it, and we factor into each fee proposal 2 or 3 visits, face-to-face visits, but we can do so much remotely. So to answer the question, there isn't really a geographic line. We'll work wherever we need to, and what we often find is we'll do one job in Chelmsford, for instance, and then we'll do 2 or 3. Because they then talk to their friends. The builder actually likes working with us. It's getting a lot easier to work remotely and work throughout the UK. I don't see it as a barrier. If you're good enough, you can work anywhere.
And this brings us on to something that I think you do differently and is a very interesting thing that you do. And that's actually on your website, breaking it down as to the services that you provide and what it costs. When people come to you, are they coming via the website so that they've actually taken in a lot of this information first? Yeah,
the majority are either coming in through companies that we've worked with, so building companies that recommend us, and they usually talk through the way that we work anyway, or it's coming through social media or the website. And then we find that either if they've read our ebook or if they've gone through a couple of pages on our website, there's enough information there that they know what sort of service we're going to provide and how we do it slightly differently than the majority of architects in the UK, actually. And doing that helps to pre-qualify the customer. They're a lot better educated and aware of what's going to happen, because the majority of our people have never built a house before. They've never done this. It's a huge challenge and thing that they're going to commit to, and majority of them have never worked with an architect. So they don't know what an architect can provide. And we set it out the way we do partly because of the practice I was in before, and the majority of traditional architecture practices in the UK work on a percentage cost. So they will charge you between 7 and 10% of the construction cost for their service. The big issue that I have with that is in self-build, it's all about the majority of, or the big things that, and you'll appreciate this yourself of what you're doing, is that you have a set budget. And if you do not know what your architect's fee is going to be because it's a percentage of the construction cost, you can't plan ahead. And also the other big thing is that there's no incentive for an architect who's on a percentage of the construction cost to save you any money, because their fee will be reduced by that. That's my. I may not win any friends in the architecture community, but I'm not really fussed about that.
What you have split it out into various different stages, and I think first what I would like to know is how similar is this to what Reba provide, because I did find that useful in terms of comparison. If you're trying to compare this architect to that architect, those stages were very handy. So as I'm looking at this, knowing that I've already hired my architect, I can see some of this and think, yes, the planning submission, but have you tried to simplify it, or what have you done? Maybe, or you can feel free to dive into these stages at any point.
That's fine. I mean, the RIBA Planner Works is a great backstop, and it does, as you say, it's really good for comparing other practices and other fee proposals as like for like. But to me, it doesn't. It's not. It's set up predominantly for commercial jobs, larger commercial jobs, and we used it when we started. I used it when I started because we weren't a we at that point. After a couple of projects, I realised that the self-builder and the private client's different. So I thought, well, what are the actual deliverables? What are you really interested in? You're not interested in all these different processes. You want to get a design that you love. So that's our initial design stage. So we go through lots of different processes and we will get you initial design. We usually give a couple of options for a client, taken from your project brief, which is by far the most important thing that you can actually get right. You need to think about why you're doing this and what needs to go into it. Something that we also try and do at the very start that sets us aside, and every other architect should really do it and clients should do it, is getting the potential client to think about how they're going to use their building. So user scenarios, rather than just I need 5 bedrooms and a bathroom, how do they actually use the building? So an example that we use is they're an outdoors family, and they want to be able to drive in with the bikes on the roof, get the kids out. The dog's messy, so they need to go into a wet room that's attached to the garage. They clean themselves all down before they go into the kitchen. Little things like that actually make it a home rather than a house. So getting that bit right at the start is hugely important. And then from that we would come up with a couple of different options. And what usually happens is we'll present 2 variations on a theme. Then as inherently the client will like the master bedroom layout in one and the kitchen dining layout in the other. So that becomes a third option. And then that's revised a couple of times till the client's happy. We are still, although we do this slightly differently, we're still a chartered practice. So we have to ask after every stage, are you happy to go ahead with the next stage? So actually when somebody agrees to a fee proposal with us, they're only really agreeing to the first stage. Because if they're not happy, we don't proceed. And it gives certainty. I mean, it's a nightmare for us as a business. So when you're trying to plan that you've got a fee proposal of X amount, but actually you've only really secured the first part of it. But it gives self-build and building a house, as you know, there's lots of hurdles, there's stumbling blocks, there's challenges. And you may run out of money, or there may be a change in family circumstances that you can't commit and finish it. So actually having the security that you can just stop is great.
So I've just flicked down to the prices, and you've pitched that at £5,000 excluding VAT, or 25% of the total fee. Now, I appreciate there are a few things here that this is just an indication that you've put on your website and it's an example, but I think it's really helpful. So you've budgeted approximately £250,000. That's the project that we're working on, and that's how all of these will fit in there. So you've gone for 2 routes. You've gone £5,000 versus a 25% of total fee.
Yeah.
Do you find most people go for the fixed option?
The only reason I put the percentage as an or is so that you can work out, actually, if your budget's going to be 300,000 or 500,000, that you can work out what the stages are going to be. We do not offer it as a percentage. It's a fixed cost. So I have to get the right information out of the client at the project brief stage for me to be able to work out the fee proposal, because we don't come back and ask for any more money. If we get the fee proposal, we estimate the time wrong, then that's our mistake. but you need to give the self-builder security on what actually their end budget's going to be, because professional fees will probably equate to about 9-10% of the overall construction cost. Regardless of what way it's delivered, it's still going to be, when you take in architects, engineers, surveys, the actual professional fees for planning applications and building control, it's still a significant amount of your budget. So you really want to know that before you start.
And I think what I found was it was quite difficult to compare because, as you say, some people were working with percentages. We didn't know this whole system or exactly the build route. That's the other thing, that are you going to end up building it yourself with your hands? Are you going to hire someone in? All of these are a bit flexible, which is why I quite like that idea of saying, well, look, we're just going to design the house. And you've also got on here estimated time 2 to 3 weeks to complete drawings. Is that the first set of drawings? Yeah,
that's a difficult one. So that would be if somebody says, yep, ready to go, it would take 2 or 3 weeks of our drawing time to come up with the two options. Bear in mind that this is based on us providing a full 3D model, walkthroughs and things. The cost is very different if we're just providing a set of basic 2D drawings. So if somebody comes in and has £100,000 to spend, we will limit actually what they need and what they can afford, because they don't need it. Then the fee is a lot less comparatively. But yeah, the 2 to 3 weeks is a sort of estimation on our drawing time, going back and forward and then us revising. It depends on the client. And how well we have interpreted their design and their requirements. We use Pinterest really heavily now with clients to gauge what they like aesthetically, and that's been a big change for us, and actually being able to get it right the first time. It's huge, and clients just love it. I mean, it's a really, we always try and get our clients to do lots of different boards, but also a dislike board. What do I really not like? And the key thing is husband and wife actually talking about these, because that's always an interesting one when you design something and one person's done the Pinterest board and the other one actually hates it. So that's happened a couple of times.
I was going to pat myself on the back there for saying, yep, we've done Pinterest, but we've done exactly what you said, that Kay has put the Pinterest board together, and I've gone, well, okay. But we're also in a slightly interesting situation that Kay she wants a house of a particular feel, and I am really the one that's sort of pushed in, I want to build my own house. So I feel that there's give and take in this, and that is another conversation that's very important, working together, and I have no idea what the full solutions are.
There's a lot of you have to work together. It's the same as anything. You pick your battles.
Planning though is something that I'm virtually at this stage now where it does link to that first stage though, doesn't it? Because you can't just go crazy. So how do you work between this stage 2 planning submission versus stage 1? Is there any elements of planning in the first bit?
Yeah, it really depends. So if there is a contentious element with planning, so if it is housing in the countryside, or if it's a green belt, or if it's on a floodplain, or anything that can be difficult, we would always get either a pre-application inquiry dealt with, or get a planning consultant in if there is contentious elements, and we would do that at the first design stage. Something also that we also do now in that first stage is a cost check, and part of what you picked up on you wanting to build it yourself, that decision has to be made quite early on, because it really affects your budget in a huge way, what you've got to spend, therefore how big the house is going to be. So we look at a cost check at the very first stage now as well, and just make sure that you're comfortable with how much work you're going to do, where you're going to buy things, because the self-builder can save so much money by non-traditional means of procurement, but you need to know that from day one, and there's no point being happy with a design that you can't afford. But yeah, so planning, there is crossover between stage 1 and stage 2. But if it's a replacement dwelling, or if it's somewhere within a settlement boundary that actually you're not going to have a planning issue, a lot of people will just progress straight on to getting the design right and then submitting the planning. So, but as I say, I would always suggest if there's any issues or any contentiousness, I would go for a pre-application inquiry.
Your planning submission, maybe you could explain how much work is involved for you and how you get people through this stage and what it costs and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of work. We always try and we're very good, I think, at getting a lot more of our clients' desires through the planning process than other practices, because we give really good rendered images. We spend a lot of time working on sight lines and the streetscape, so how it fits into an existing street. And also, to me, the key, certainly in England, the key thing is the design and access statement. It's not so much in Scotland, but in England, actually a really good design and access statement that takes you through the whole process, the why the design is the way it is, the ethos, the design evolution, how you access the site, and the planning policy. So there's a lot of work goes into that, and we try and, as I said, we can usually get more of the client's desires through because of the strength of the information. So it's always better to pay for a good service and the right amount of work, rather than just getting it through. We're out of 240 projects. We've only not got planning on 2, and we knew that they were complete chancing. That we knew. I mean, the clients knew straight away as well that they weren't going to get it. It was a punt, shall we say? So we've got a really good success rate on that. So there's a lot of work, and again, what we try and factor in is that we don't know how much time the planning officer is going to need, or if there's going to be lots of site visits, or if they're going to ask for supporting information, or loads of different things. So we try and account for that at the start, but there is a lot of work involved in there.
So stage 2, on your current costs on this example, £4,000, excluding VAT, or 20% of this total fee. And that, I think while we're on this point, I wouldn't mind asking you, how do you find the planning system from place to place? Because you do sometimes find the architects have a bit of a relationship with certain people and you're working everywhere. But then that said, you've told me that actually you feel you've got a good way of progressing ideas.
So this is one of the barriers that we come up against, that certainly in a practice and trying to get work in an area that we're not from. And historically there was the sense of that architect could go and take the planner out for lunch, and go and meet them and just call up the phone and make a couple of calls and could get things through. But those days are well and truly gone. As long as we've done the right homework, we know the planning policy for the area. We'll speak to the planners. A lot with planning is getting the planner on side, and also getting your neighbours, your future neighbours on side as well. So what some people will do is they'll design the house and they'll submit it to planning without any discussions with them. If you want the planners to feel like they're part of the decision process and part of the design process, and also your neighbours that may object. Take your drawings round before you submit with a bottle of wine, some chocolates, and go around and just sit and explain why you're wanting to do it, why you've designed things, and have room to move, change things if you need to, but make them feel like they're part of the process. So I think historically having a local architect would have helped, but it doesn't. To my mind, I don't think we've. I think our success rate speaks for itself. We've 60 to 70% of our work at the moment is Birmingham South, so a lot of these are new planning districts or parishes every time. So we get through it and we speak to the right people and follow a process and supply the right information that actually doesn't matter where we are. Or where we come from. If you know the regulations and why you're going to get something through planning, you shouldn't have an issue. So, but again, the key in planning is getting your neighbours and also getting the planners on side. And a lot of people don't know that the neighbours can also, when you've got your neighbour notification period, certainly people will object, but you can also get letters of support. So you actually ask the neighbours that are happy with what you're doing and get them to put a letter of support in. And they do count if it has to go to planning committee, that is taken into account. So little things like that, but getting the planners on side and making them feel like they're part of the process is key.
Some really good tips in there. Appreciate that. Let's move on to stage 3. Now, I don't know too much about this, but I'm aware that if everything goes okay with our planning submission and appeasing the neighbours, so forth, then we'll move on to detailed design development. Now, does this actually require a lot from the client this stage?
So, yeah. So you'll be getting a question or a list of things that you need to confirm. Finishes, materials, heating strategy, lots of different things need to be worked out at this stage. So in England it's the building regs approval, in Scotland it's building control, and the two systems are different. We can, up here in Scotland, we can only go through the local authority, and you have to have everything confirmed and submitted at the same time, then reviewed, which takes about 4 weeks, and approved before you start on site. So the benefit of the Scottish system is that everything's, I think, a lot more thought out before you start digging anything on site, as opposed to the English system where you can go to the local authority or a private certifier and you can put a notice to start work and then start work the next day and then drip feed the information. So two completely different processes. What we try and do is a mixture of both when we're working in England. We try and get everything confirmed and ready to submit, then submit it as a full package, a well thought out and detailed package, rather than drip feeding information, which is to me is a lot better, well thought out process.
Where you're going up front.
Completely, rather than making it up idea as you go along. But that's what happens. And there's the self-builder, and you'll find this, that there's a lot of hurdles and ups and downs, and things could take, as you know, that finding a plot of land could take 2 years. You could have issues with planning and it take a year, or that whole process could take a year. When you actually get ready, you just want to start. And actually stepping back and getting everything lined up and right is the better way to do than rushing ahead. And if you do rush ahead, it'll always cost you more in the long run. So getting all of that right. But building regs, building warrant is it's a compliance exercise. It's making sure that whatever you've designed complies with the current building regulations.
So on this, you've costed it up, in our example, £6,000 excluding VAT,
yes,
or 30% of the total fee. Anything else we need to know about this stage?
No, as I say, it's just make the decision, spend the time, research and get things right at this stage, and get the SAP calculation or the PHPP passive house certification process that you'll go through. You have to work that out and go through what our strategy is, and because that affects hugely your budget, but also your running costs for the whole time you're in the house. So it's a key stage, but again, it's another compliance tick box so that you can continue on.
Stage 4, production information.
If you were doing a small extension after building regs, you've got enough information that you can go and build your extension. But if your building's anything more substantial, you need to have a set of construction drawings that shows how you're going to build it. So the building regs, stage 3, everything will be detailed to a point. So there'll be an eaves detail, a window detail, there'll be a door opening detail, but it's only to get through the compliance exercise of building regs. It's not to actually be able to build it. So if you're a self-builder and you've never done this before, you'll have the scenario on a wet Wednesday morning when you have a brickie saying, how do I do this? Or how do you want your eaves profile to match into the top of the wall head? And you'll go, I don't know. But if you've got a set of construction drawings, you'll have every detail worked out and you'll be able to just point and say, well, there's the drawings, build it to what my architect said. So it's hugely vital for a self-builder to get it done, or to get it built the way you want it to be built. And certainly for something, if you are going low energy or fabric first approach, you need to have all the details worked out, because it's not the way that the builder will normally have built. There'll be tape, there'll be sealant products that they've never seen or used before, and there's lots of different. If these aren't shown on a drawing, they will just go off and do what they want, and therefore when you get your air test result, it won't be what you need. Another big part of this production information stage, if you're going to go for something, an off-site construction methods, will it be SIPs or ICF or value therm timber frames, so any of these things that are part built in a factory, you will get given a set of drawings as the client that you have to review. and you have to sign for. So you need to retain your architect to try and help you make sure that these are all right, and that needs to liaise or be reviewed in line with the window and door schedule. I don't know if you've got any of your window or door quotes yet, or seen a window and door quote, but each one of the window and door suppliers will have their own way of quoting. It'll be about 25, 30 pages long, and the first 5 pages is how you read the quote, and they're all different. And your window and door package may be £20,000. It's a big number that you're going to have to sign for and make sure that the windows openings match the kit size. So you have to have all this information to hand. And a lot of people, when we do discussions and I do talks, they'll say, well, actually, I could just save myself that £4,000 and not go for a construction set. But if you imagine your window and door package is £25,000 and your kit's £90,000, £4,000 is a small price to pay to make sure that that works. So that would be my sort of key takeaway on the construction package. Just pay a little bit to make sure that all of the big numbers work.
For me, it's very important that I have a good experience on this project if I can make it happen at all. And so I don't intend to be doing very much if I can possibly help it. Obviously, if we get very, very strapped for cash, then I'll be out with a paintbrush and doing those last
I'm sure you'll want to do something.
I want to video it.
Video it. The good thing, what all of our, pretty much 90% of our clients, and that's whether or not they're in professional services or they're a high-flying lawyer, they will all go out and tape their building. So they'll tape the joints of the internal face of the outside walls, and they'll sit with their sticky tape because they know that taping all the joints will make their building airtight. And it's a great thing for you to do to be part of the build process, but also it's a great workmanship check to see if everything's right. So that I would suggest you do that. That would be a good thing.
Yeah, quite interesting. I know, obviously, depending on the building, there can be a lot of it or not so much of it, depending on the construction method, if it's ICF or whatever.
Sure.
However, you're right. It does. Anything that you do on the project will bring you more into that experience. I think what I'm concerned about is that, I'd like to be able to do something else beyond this if it all goes okay. And exactly. I think the more involved that I get into it, it might have the reverse effect. So stage one, just have an easy build. That's what I'm after.
Yeah, so get the first one out of the way.
I'd be going for your stage 5 as well. On-site supervision.
Yep.
Why do we need it? Is it the same in Scotland and England? Would we just trust the contractor? How many visits?
So a lot depends. So is it the same as Scotland and England? I would say no. And the benefit that you do have with the building regs process in England is that building control inspector can and will be on site, and they actually, in my experience, really want to be there and they want to be involved. In Scotland, they're supposed to come and assess the work, not help. They're supposed to come and assess the work. There's so little funding with the building control and planning departments that they don't have time to come out, so they're not involved. So you've not got that process or that backstop of somebody coming to help you check things. So it is different, Scotland to England. Our on-site supervision, we try not be involved. So traditional architects will say, right, I need a retainer of £2,500 a month or £1,000 a month for a couple of visits. If you've done your job right, you shouldn't need to be there. So if we've given you the information and you've hired competent contractors, you shouldn't need it. So the way that we usually work is we'll provide an ad hoc service. We're always at the end of the phone, and we do like to come down and see and photograph and be part of the build. So that's something, I'll shoot myself right in the foot here, but it's something that we usually tend to end up just doing for free, and we'll try and link it up with another site visit or another client visit, and we'll just pop in. But we're at the end of the phone, and we're not a practice that as soon as the phone rings we start a clock for like lawyers do. So it's ad hoc services are better on that. The only different where that we would provide a requirement for a service is if we're providing a mortgage certificate. So if we're acting on behalf of the mortgage company, providing an architect certificate or a CML lender certificate to say, at the end of this stage, this work's done, you can now give a tranche break pay down of £100,000 for the groundworks and the kit. So if we're certifying that, we need to be there at each visit. So something that there is value in is having somebody or a professional or somebody outside coming in at handover, so at key stages, so groundworks to kit, windows going in, wind and watertight. And then from that point in, it's usually just trades doing their own thing. And that's the beauty of self-build. You can get to the wind and watertight part and just get your local trades in. Even on a passive house or a fabric first or low energy house, it's basic. It's just normal stuff. Once you get inside the shell, it's just an electrician coming in and doing his normal job. So I don't think your architects should be retained or need to be retained if they've done their job right.
Just going over the whole generic fee proposal that we're talking about today, the 4-bedroom, 2-storey, say 200 square metre house, yes. A budget of around about £250,000. Yep. And as we tot up all of your fees, it's just below 20 grand. Yes. So what do you find? How much of your services do people use? How do you fare in the market? How do you actually set your costs?
Yeah, so our costs are where they are now because we're getting a better name, and we're doing more work, and we've got better staff, we've got better team, so we can charge the fee that we do because we actually deliver on what we need to. But I cost check. At the end of a project, the guys will record their hours, and we'll review what the time was spent on it, as any business should. Review what they've done, what their overheads, their costs have been, and then just we'll review it, and we review it every quarter just to see if it's if the fees are still right. The fees will vary greatly on the client's budget and their requirements. We're doing £1-2 million self builds at the moment, and we're also doing 3-bedroom homes for £70,000. So our fee, we're happy to work on anything if it's a project that we want to. So the fee varies. The fee structure is dependent on each project, and I would say the majority of people take the full service right the way through. And yeah, I mean it works, and I've certainly not had anybody come back and say they've not felt value out of it. I've never had. Granted, when we come up against some of our competitors, we are expensive, or we are slightly more expensive, but nobody has come back and actually at the end quibbled over the fee. But what I would say is we're still a lot more cost effective than a comparative practice down south, and we'll still factor in all of our travel costs and all these different things, and still be a lot more cost effective to a good practice. So
I think people should charge what they feel they want to charge. I don't have an issue with anyone charging ridiculous rates, because maybe they'll just attract a different client. And I think that's fantastic that you've been able to go through all of those today. And do you find as well that clients quite like that they feel that they're not on an isolated, well, I'm going to charge you this much. They can see what they're getting, and okay, it might be on a sliding scale according to their budget.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think, and one thing we're always very happy is all our clients, our future clients, speak to our current clients or our previous clients. So there's nothing hidden. They can go and look at our builds that are on site, or speak to our previous clients and see, well, what did you was it value for money? Was it too expensive? Or, I mean, we're very open about what we do and the people that we work with, and unless obviously they want privacy. I think the approach that the fixed fee is by far the best way to go. It has to be. And again, if somebody's not willing to show you what their costs are on their website, then they're hiding things. That would be my thought on it anyway. So,
one final question to you, and that is about just this area in general. That we're self-builders, we're coming into this, we'd like to hire an architect. We could go away and just do it all ourselves. Is there anything we should watch out for when we're coming and looking at costs?
To me, and I appreciate it, so I pay for professional services all the time. So we've got our accountants and things. We work with people. You work with people. The figure is, granted, I'm not being flippant about money, but if it's the right, your architect, you'll know this yourself, they're part of your life for 8 or 9 months. You have to be able to work with them. It's a very personal thing, building your own house. It shouldn't all be cost driven. It certainly shouldn't be anywhere near all cost driven. But you should, if there's fees that are, if you're doing comparative exercise on 4 or 5 different architects, and there's ones that are The ones that are far too cheap aren't doing it right and aren't making a profit, or they may not be in business by the time you're going through the project. But the ones that are very expensive, well, they have to justify it. And as you say, it's fine for people to charge what they want, but you have to be able to back it up, and you have to be able to deliver a service. And if you're a specialist in a field, you have to be able to prove that you are. And again, if you're going for something like Passive House, you have to, for certification, you have to accept that there's an additional charge to that. But I think it's when people are looking at costs, or engaging with an architect or a professional, spend a lot of time on it, speak to their clients, do your research. There's no excuse, I think, anymore for a bad purchase. And that goes for anything, whether it's stuff online or a professional service. There's so much information out there, and research and learn about people and spend time with them. On average, while I'll have met a client 2 or 3 times, we'll have been to their site, we'll have spent a couple of hours on the phone, and they'll have read our ebook, and they'll know about the content that we've got online, and they'll be able to trust us. And if you can't do that when you're about to make a big purchase with somebody, then they're probably not the people for you.
Allan, it's been good to have a chat. Thank you very much for coming onto the podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Head online to take a look at the show notes that accompany this session, houseplanninghelp.com/168, where you can review the main information. We'll link you across to Allan's website, to his blog, and specifically that cost page that we've been talking about in today's episode. We've got a few photos of Allan's projects as well, all at houseplanninghelp.com/168. Let's finish on a Hub update, and this is your last chance to join the Hub during the current enrolment. The window's about to close, so get in quick, houseplanninghelp.com/join. A few questions have come up during this period, so I thought let's try and address them on the podcast. First of all, people have asked, how much time do I need to invest into the Hub to get a good amount out of it as well? I was thinking about this, that there's no set answer, obviously. Like many things in life, I suppose the more that you put in, the more you get out. I would say, though, a couple of hours a month is probably a minimum to feel that you're getting a good amount back. Second question, how do I know that you'll be able to answer my questions? Well, I often say, I can't necessarily answer your questions. I'm on this journey. Perhaps I'm ahead of you. Maybe I can answer your questions, but I also feel more like a facilitator. So if there's something you are struggling with, often I'll know someone who can help, or it could even be someone in the community. It's amazing how much knowledge is held between us. For example, Mark Brinkley came on to our last community call, and I was intrigued to see and hear him say later on, actually, I was surprised, I learned a few things during that call. So it just goes to show that everyone has some information that other people don't know, and sharing all of that helps. We meet in the middle there. Also, when is the right time to join? I think a number of people wait until they've got land. Yes, I understand that. But I do think it can be of benefit before that. And maybe being surrounded by people who are actively in the middle of their projects is a good thing for you to just drive you forwards, because there'll be some ups and downs. And that's one of the good sides of it, the community being there for you. And if you get stuck in earlier, it might help you progress sooner. Who knows? And we'll just do one last question. What can I get in the Hub that I can't get from anywhere else? Personally, I feel no one is doing what I'm doing, and I guess part of it is those in-depth video case studies, having professional quality videos focused on decision making. I don't think you can really find that on YouTube. I know people cover builds and so forth, but I would say that this is pretty unusual. Also, keeping yourself around like-minded people. Have you ever heard that phrase, you are the average of the 5 people you associate with most? I am on board with that 100%. So if you're in this community, you're surrounded by people who are actually doing it. They're not talking about it, they're getting on and moving on. And the Hub will never be finished. It's my mission to simplify the journey for all new Hub members. Hopefully people who join a year down the line, 5 years down the line, will get a much better experience than now. But I always like to think that is a good thing. I remember at university, I look back and the year below had much better equipment than we did when we were doing all our filming. And so it's the same sort of thing. I want to see that progression as we move through the years, making it better and better. houseplanninghelp.com/join if you want some more details. When our spring enrolment closes, then it will just move to a page to get yourself on the VIP early bird list for when we reopen at the end of the year. Right, next time, architect and author Claire Nash is my guest. We'll be discussing contemporary vernacular design. Hope you can make that one. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.